Getting to the senior executive level isn't just about doing great work. My guest today, Deepa Purushothaman, has spent decades studying what actually separates the people who rise from the ones who stall right before the C-suite. And she has the research, the receipts, and the real talk to back it up.
That's the error that I find with a lot of the women who I work with that are manager level. They think the work speaks for itself. But your reputation, your value, your offering within the company doesn't speak for itself. You have to speak for it. You have to speak through it. You have to find ways to do that. At the executive level, you're actually really judged for your judgment. How do you make decisions? How do you operate in uncertainty? And I think where people miss or get it wrong is they don't realize that judgment is a lot about yourself. It's about how you show up. It's about the choices that you make.
Welcome to In Confidence, where what we share in confidence helps us grow in confidence. This season is all about solving your top problems. And the problem we're going to solve today is, how can I get promoted to a senior executive position? Now, I could not imagine a better guest to come solve this problem with us, because my guest today has spent over 2 decades inside some of the world's most prestigious companies. And she became the first Indian American woman to make partner at Deloitte. She left to write the best-selling book, The First, the Few, the Only. She became an executive fellow at Harvard Business School, and she founded The Rewrite, an unconventional think tank focused on power, work, and leadership. She is one of my dearest friends, a trusted sounding board, and genuinely one of the sharpest people I know when it comes to understanding how power actually works. Welcome to the show, Deepa. Deepa, welcome to In Confidence.
Thank you for having me.
So we have been friends, I was doing the math, almost a decade now.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. I was going to say my sister's going to be jealous when she sees the video, because I think you knew her before you knew me.
Yes, your sister and I went to college together, and I remember our mutual friend Tanya, who also went to college with us, was like, you have to meet Deepa. She is changing the world, and you have to go to one of her salons, and we've been fast friends since.
Absolutely.
Well, today, before we get started with the content, I want to ask you our 2 signature questions. The first is, what are you proudest of from the past 12 months of your life?
Earlier this year, we applied for a really large grant for The Rewrite that would really change the direction of the company. And I'm really proud that we applied, because it felt like we weren't ready. It felt like there was no chance we were going to win. It felt like, it's too far out there. And we did it anyway. And I just think that's such an important lesson, right? You don't win what you don't try for, but it's also that you just go for it, right? You just never know.
I love that. And actually, this is a perfect segue, because you're going to talk about Rewrite. For those of our audience who don't know you very well, how do you make a difference in the world? Give us all the highlights of your life story, and it'll, I'm sure, tie back to Rewrite.
Okay, yes. So I spent 20 years in corporate. I was a partner at Deloitte. I thought I'd go there for a year or 2. I ended up spending 21 years. I also led the women's initiative, so this focus on women has always been part of my work. And I left in 2020 to start a few of my own companies. I'm on my second one now, to write a book called The First, the Few, the Only. It's in the background, really about women and power. And I started The Rewrite a few years ago, and it's a think tank, an unconventional think tank, where we talk about power, work, and leadership. And I'm just really excited about what we're doing, because I think my power, my magic, what I offer the world is really studying patterns in the workplace, because I believe once you see patterns, you can decide how you're going to react, how you're going to act, how you're going to show up. And too many of us don't see the patterns. We see something, but we don't have the language for it. So I give language to those things. And I like to say I help, people, but especially women, find their power at work.
Oh, I love that. And you have been the first, the few, and the only.
Yes.
You were I want to get this right. You were the first Indian American woman to make partner at Deloitte. Is that right?
I was, yes, I was. And it feels like, not that long ago, but it was probably at this point, 15 years ago. But yes, I was. And I was also a pretty young partner. I made partner at 34. I went up when I was 33. So there were a lot of just firsts and kind of navigating a space where, right, I didn't necessarily see leaders that looked like me in front of me. And so I had to find my voice and my style and my way of navigating on my own.
And I've been a part of your book. I mean, your best-selling book.
Yes.
And you regularly
yes.
and you regularly contribute to Harvard Business Review. You're part of the Harvard community. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of the research I do, I'm an executive fellow at Harvard Business School, so I do a lot of my research under their umbrella. A lot of what I study is women at work with them. Again, that's just an area where we always need more research. It's still, relatively new, and so that's a lot of what I study with them. And I go back and I help teach some of their executive ed programs. So I'm actually going back next week.
You would have been my favorite. I didn't go to Harvard, but if I had, you would have been my favorite professor. I'm convinced. All right. Well, this season, we are solving our audience's biggest problems. We launched a survey, and they came back with a set of problems. And when I saw this particular one come back, I said, Deepa is the only person I want to have on the podcast for it. Think of it as a phone a friend. I feel like we're old enough to remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Yeah.
And I was like, phone a friend. And the question we were asked is, how do I get promoted to a senior executive position? And I was like, you're the one person that I know has not only done it, but also coached people through it. I want to start off with, what's the biggest difference between being a manager, like a great manager, and being a senior executive? And where do people get stuck on that?
Yeah, it's a big question, because I think a lot of us don't have visibility into what happens at the executive level, so we make up a lot of things, right? So at the manager level, we are getting tasks done. There's a scope of work, we're trying to get that done, we're managing our teams, but it's really really focused on execution. I think at the executive level, you're actually really judged for your judgment. How do you make decisions? How do you operate in uncertainty? How do you decide what to go? And it's, in our language, in our consulting world, Lisa, you and I were both part of that. It's like, how do you steer the ship? And so that's very different than getting the work done. And I think where people miss or get it wrong is they don't realize that judgment is a lot about yourself. It's about how you show up. It's about the choices that you make. And that's a little bit of the difference. It's not about just the work, it's about the choices and the vision that you set. And that's one place that they get stuck. I think the second place that they get stuck is that we forget that at the executive level, our peers matter a lot more. So sometimes when we're a manager, we're just focused on getting our work done, and it's important that we have followership and that our team likes us, but we don't really focus so much on our peers. At the executive level, you do a lot of bartering, you do a lot of trading, you do a lot of kind of getting people to go on the journey with you, and that is a very different process of decision making than that happens at the manager level. So I think those are the two differences. Not just focus on getting the work done, and then taking other people on the journey with you, and that your judgment and who you are as part of that process is very different.
I want to double click on both of those, because
Yeah.
I love both of those tracks. Let's start with the first one, which is around judgment and your own decision making. And what are some of the things that you see go right for folks on their climb through the ladder, and where they might trip up on that dimension?
I think people are just afraid to make decisions, to make choices. I think especially as women, right, we tend to hold back. We tend to want perfect information. And operating at that level, you don't get that, right? So you just have to kind of make a choice, apologize if it's wrong, and then reset the direction. And we have just been taught there's no room, and rightfully so, it's because a lot of us are first, right? So there's no room to make errors, and we're walking on this tightrope. And so that's just a really big place where we have to get comfortable with making a choice without full information, and knowing that we can course correct once we have more, especially, Lisa, in today's environment where it just feels like it's even more volatile, more uncertain. I think that's actually tripping up even executives who are in the role now. The level of uncertainty, the level of risk taking, the level of having to, apologize and backtrack is very different in the leaders I work with who are in the seat right now.
How do I de-risk taking risk? What are the things that if I've got to make a judgment call to demonstrate that I have the chops to take on more, how do I de-risk that? How do I make sure that doesn't blow back on me, or I might lose my job in the process of doing that?
Yeah, I think we have to get past the idea that every decision has like a job ending ramification. And I think that's part of like getting over the fear. I think part of it is also realizing we're in an environment where everyone feels like that, right? And so you have to get comfortable looking at the data. I think a lot of us are also learning that we can trust our gut a little bit more. Like I just see leadership changing in this moment where it's not just data driven, it is also our gut driven. Like what do we believe in this situation? Because no one knows what to do. So what feels like the right answer, and what is our past history that we can use to kind of bring into this situation? So it's all of those things together. But I just want to really highlight for your audience, like no one has all the answers. I just think some of us have been taught it's okay to fake it till you make it, or it's okay to, you can apologize and course correct. And I think some of us feel more pressure that we've not been able to do that in our lives. And so that's, I think, a big difference.
Well, I think that builds followership when you're like, I'm not quite sure what the right answer is here, but we're going to go down this direction. And if it doesn't work out, we'll course correct. I feel like that takes a lot of self-trust to be able to say, hey, I don't know exactly where we're going to go, but I want to follow someone who's going to admit that to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we just did a piece for HBR just in the last couple of weeks, and it was about dealing in uncertainty, and it was about how value-driven or mission-driven leaders feel especially torn in this moment because so much of their work is who they are. Like there's such a inherent sort of connection to that work. And so a lot of them feel very uncertain what to do with their budgets, what to do with their direction. And what we found is it's less about being fully transparent and more about sharing what you know in the moment that is really what people want right now. Because it's hard to be fully transparent when you don't know what's going to happen next, right? In a very different way.
So it's more about here's what I do have information on, and that's why we're making this judgment call.
Yeah. Sharing what you know when you know it, and then sharing when you know more at the next step.
Okay, got it. I love that. One of my dear friends, Dr. Romy Mushtak, one of the things she's talking a lot about right now, and I love that you talked about gut instinct. She said, that's not wrong. It's the problem is people are so dysregulated that they're actually, what they think is their gut is actually fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
So you have to actually level set and regulate yourself to listen to your gut. And so she's saying the gut is never wrong. It's actually a set of pattern recognitions, in your brain. And she's a neuroscientist. And she said the most important thing, though, is if you come with a whole bunch of anxiety and fear to the table and insecurity, then you won't be able to trust your gut because you're listening to the wrong part of your body.
Absolutely. I think we need to listen to all parts, right? And that's part of, I think, what is changing in leadership. So many of us have been taught like that's not how you lead, but that is part of how a lot of us lead, and it's actually what makes us better leaders.
All right, let's go to the other part, which is around how I build collegiality or peer-based relationships or followership. What are some of the things that you see people do there on their way up the ladder?
I think one of the biggest things is taking people on your journey with you. And what I mean by that is, as a manager, you can kind of just focus on your work and you don't always have to tell people your process. And what people don't realize is at that next level, people are trying to understand, what does your judgment look like? How do you recover? What do you do when something goes wrong? And so I think taking people on that journey of like how you make choices, what happens when you make a mistake, how you share your information, all of those parts are just as important as kind of here's the deliverable or here's the final product.
I love that. Now, one of the things that I find is that a lot of women assume that if they just are really good at their job, that they'll get promoted.
Yeah.
Can you help me sort through that why performance isn't enough?
I think performance is enough at a certain, up to a certain level, but I would say at the manager level, that really starts to change. And it's not just about performance, it's about judgment, it's about risk taking, it's about all the things that we are talking about. And part of the challenge is, as women, we have been taught, not to toot our own horn or not to like talk about our accolades, not to be too boastful. And to be fair, I want to say like a lot of the research out there, if you look at the research, it says for women to advance to the highest levels, they have to be both likable and they have to be competent, right? And sometimes when we talk about all of our accomplishments, women can come across as not likable. And so it is like this double-edged sword where it's difficult to navigate. With that said, if you don't talk about what you're doing, if you don't talk about your successes, if you don't really, not just talk about the work, but how you're doing the work and all the success you've had, people don't always see that. And I think that's the error that I find with a lot of the women who I work with at a manager level. They think the work speaks for itself. But your reputation, your value, your offering within the company also has to speak, and it doesn't speak for itself. You have to speak for it. You have to speak through it. You have to find ways to do that. And I want to share, like, it doesn't have to be in ways that feel inauthentic. Like, I'm not a big boastful person, but one of the things I used to do is I like to write, right? I wrote a book. I used to like to write emails. So what I would do is at the end of every week, I would write an email on all the things that the team accomplished to give them credit as well and give them visibility. But in the end, it actually ended up giving me visibility, which I didn't realize when I first started that practice as a young manager. So I think there are ways to do it that feel more palatable to us, but we don't talk about it enough, so we don't know that there are other ways to do that.
So let me create a scenario.
Yeah.
Let's say I'm a director at a pharmaceutical company. Let's just pick, and I've been a very successful manager. I've got a few people on my team. I've got a couple of successes, and my VP is getting promoted. So that VP slot is going to become open, or my VP is leaving for another company. So that VP slot is open. There's a couple of directors who want it. Mm-hmm. What would you tell me are the things that I either should have done already or should be doing now?
I think one, make sure you put your name in the hat. Don't assume people think you want it or know that you want it. So be very clear. I'd love this opportunity, and here's why. I would have your, business case or your list of like why you're ready available for people, because you may assume that people making the decision know of all the things you've done for the last 5 years in your role, but they may not know, right? They may not be seeing that. So having a way that you can tell your story about why you're ready for that position, why you're already doing that position is really important. And then also talking about the qualities you bring to that role is really important, right? Like I'm a good risk taker, I'm good at developing other people. Here are all the ideas I have for when I'm in that role. So I think all of those things are really important in order to get the role.
And what about my support matrix? What should I have been doing for the 5 years that I've been in that role to build up my support matrix?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about how important sponsorship is, right? Sponsorship is who's kind of speaking your accolades when you're not in the room. And in order to get to a certain level, that is really important. But I think to get to the C-suite, it's not, sponsorship is not going to get you there because all of a sudden they're your peers. It's actually showing people who you are, how you make decisions, how you're going to take other people along the ride with you and into the process with you, and getting to let them know you. Because in some ways, right, to get to that most senior level, you're all of a sudden going to become a peer of the people that are judging you. And a little bit of what they're looking for is, can they get along with you? Can they work with you? Can they understand your decision-making process so they're not going to be surprised in their domains? And that's a lot of what we don't always understand, that they have to see you as a peer. They have to see you as ready, and you have to show them why you're ready and how you're ready and what you're going to be like when you're sitting in that seat with them.
And here's by the way, I love that point, because one of the things I did when I was climbing the ladder at the other consulting firm was when I was a business analyst, I would ask everyone more senior to me, hey, what's one thing I could be doing better? Yeah. And I would go back to them and be like, oh, I've been doing that differently in the last 6 months. What's the next thing? Yeah. And all of a sudden, everyone had fingerprints on my journey. It was almost like, she's the most coachable person we have. Like, there's nothing she hasn't tried and failed and done again. So building that matrix of people. But then when you get there, you're right. There's a question around likability, or I want to get along with this person. I can get work done with this person. Yeah. I also like your fingerprint analogy, because it's also that they're invested in you now, Lisa, right? Because they have given you suggestions and you've listened to them. So it almost feels like you've forced their hand in mentoring you, whether or not you meant to, right? And so that's also part of it. I think they're invested in your success. And what I love about you saying that earlier around kind of putting your hat in the ring, I think putting your hat in the ring also might be something like, hey, what would it take for me to be a VP?
Yeah.
If not this time, what's the things that you want me to demonstrate, or are there opportunities that I should be taking on that you could let me try out?
Absolutely. I think it's both things. I think it's saying that you're ready and that's a path that you want. But I also find for a lot of women, when they are asked if they want the opportunity, they don't know what to say, or that they're uncomfortable saying, yes, I want it, because they may not feel ready. So I think it's both things, right? It's signaling that is a path you want, but also if you're asked, say yes. You'll figure it out.
I know, we're women. We always figure it out.
We always figure it out. Yeah.
Say yes even if you don't feel ready. I love that.
Yes.
No, I have a write-in question on this one, which is someone who's been at that manager level, but historically has been perceived as a bit difficult. Just in terms of, and I think this person said, like, I have RBF, I have resting B face, or I can come across as a little too assertive, and so people they don't get the warm fuzzy, like I'm almost too direct when I say things. And she said, I think this is holding me back from getting that next promotion. Have you seen this amongst people you work with in terms of they're really good executors? Like, what's gotten them to be the great taskmaster is not the same thing as what I want to join this club of people in this particular suite. And then people are like, she's a little difficult to work with. What do you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what I was saying with, like, at that next level, it's the partnerships. It's the way that you build relationships. It's the way you trade. So much of what I didn't know is at that most senior level, it's trades that actually is how it works, right? I'll give you a yes on this decision if you give me the head count on that, right? Like, it's everything is a trade. So they want to know that you're going to be able to negotiate, that you're going to play fair, that you're going to be kind in that sort of exchange. And so that's what they're looking for. what I'd say to her, and Lisa, you've given me some of this feedback, like you were featured in an HBR we did a couple of years ago. And the feedback is you can change whatever your reputation is. I think too often we think when your reputation is defined for you, there's nothing I can do about it. But like your example, you went and asked people around you, what do I need to do in order to get to that next level? This person who wrote in has that information. This is the challenge that you have to overcome. So figure out a plan over the next 12 months. How are you going to overcome that? If the feedback is you are difficult, start to ask, what does that look like? I want to really change that. I want to understand that. Can I check in with you after this meeting to see, did I do something different that felt better, or did I do that same, activity again, or that same comment again that you said I did last time? Like, start to use that to get more information and make a plan for how you can fix it. Because I don't believe, like, once you get feedback, you can't overcome it. I'm not saying it's easy, but feedback is gold. It's a way that you can build a plan to what you want next.
Yeah, and I love this write-in because I think there's a really important insight around when you've been that successful charging ahead, it takes a little bit of a reframe to take the armor off. Yes. And be like, okay, people don't like working with me. Yeah. And starting to be vulnerable about that. Like, I get the sense that I'm perceived as difficult. How do we change that? Yep. I love that things can change. You can change your reputation.
And it's also back to that, competent and likable comment. That is very common for women, especially to get to that next level. So we have to figure it out. We can't assume that that's, the only thing out there.
It kind of sucks that we have to do all the things. I think that sucks a bit.
It does suck, but it's also, you can choose to do them or not, but it's information, right? And I think that it's just a healthier way to see it, as opposed to, listen, the structure doesn't work. We all know that. I feel like we're having more conversations about that, but you get to decide what you do next now that you know that.
Now, you mentioned earlier you're one of the youngest people and the first Indian American woman to make partner at Deloitte. From that experience, what can you share about power and visibility, like in terms of making that climb?
Yeah, I want to say when I started, I was the only non-MBA in my 700-person start class. So
Me too.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Okay.
No MBA.
Yes. So I was a very odd duck, and I was also a little bit younger than everybody else because of the level that I started with, just how I came into the firm. And so right out of the gate, I was very different. And rather than try and pretend what I wasn't, and I want to be clear, like, I didn't know this at that age. I think I was 23, 24, when I joined. Like, it wasn't like a wise, like, I'm going to play this role. I just didn't know anything. I didn't even know how to do the basics, right? Like use Excel or some of the things that my peers did because they went to business school. And so I came out of the gate just saying, I don't know, but I'd love to learn. And I was a sponge. Whereas I think some of my peers were like, I know how to do everything, whether or not they knew that or not. And so that became my style. My style from the beginning, the way I was visible, was not focused on all the things I did know, but I don't know how to do it, but I'm really good at figuring it out, right? I will outwork or outdo or just, be willing to help in ways that I think other people felt like certain work was beneath them. And that became my style and my way of working. And I think it's really important to figure out what works for you. And really lean into that. And I think for a lot of us, we believe that leadership is a certain archetype, is a certain way. And so we think we have to be that way, right? In order to rise in my company, I have to cut off all these parts of myself. But the women that I work with who are truly powerful, who are truly successful, who really get to the top, don't necessarily contort and conform to get there. They are actually themselves, but they understand how to do that in a way that works for them and also works for the company that they work in.
I love that. I love not having to completely contort and conform. We can modify, adjust, and I love that. What does it take to get decision makers to see you as the obvious choice for a senior executive job?
I think there's three things that we have to think about. First is that they have to be able to trust you, right? So the first piece is trust. So can they give you a scope of work, and are you going to be able to do it? But can they also trust your judgment, right? Like we talked about with high risk, high volatility. I think the second thing that we have to know in these situations that those roles are more scarce. Like there is competition for those roles. So again, putting your hat in the ring, being really clear that you want it, being a little bit transparent about how you will lead when you're in the role, so they understand what they're betting on. And then I think the third thing is really thinking about how you create followership. So not only how your team has trusted you, but how do you start to get people to agree that you are not only going to be collegiate in decision making, but that you're going to be someone that helps them rise too. And so I think all of those three things are really important to make your case, to really show people that you're ready for that role.
I love that. And I wonder, because one of the things I loved was all the places you can practice those things that are lower risk. Like you mentioned, you ran the women's initiative at Deloitte. Yep. My hypothesis is there's a lot of other places where you can get visibility that aren't related to the core work to demonstrate some of those skills. Is that fair?
And there's a lot of different ways you can show those skills. It can even just show up in how you organize an office activity, right? Or it can show up in how you respond to a request or a task. Like it's not, I think part of the disconnect, we think it's just how I get my work done that matters, but it's the whole package. It's how people interpret their interactions with you. That can even be a small sort of interaction over a lunch. That demonstrates your leadership style. All the things you do outside of the workplace that you talk about, that you bring into your leadership style also matters. So all of that matters. And I think we forget that sometimes. We're so focused on, let me show I'm really good at my job, but they're not evaluating you for the job that you're in. They're evaluating you for the job you're going to be in. And that's really the difference.
Oh, I love that. I love that they're evaluating for the job that you will be in. And that leads me to a question on what are some of the biggest myths or mistakes people have in terms of their assumptions around that senior executive job?
I think they assume once I get to the seat, then I will be who I am. That's the one thing I find with most women I work with, right? So I'm going to contort and conform, or I'm going to give up parts of myself, right? And just do what I need to do to get to the seat. Because once I'm in the seat, I'll have power, and then I'll do me. And I remember when I pivoted from Deloitte and I decided I wanted to write the book, I sat down with a public company CFO, like one of the top 10 in the country. And she said to me, Deepa, I sit in a seat of power and I don't feel powerful. And that comment blew my mind, because this is this powerful woman, right? Very, in the late stages of her career. And she said, it's because I gave up so many parts of myself to get here. And now I don't necessarily know how to bring that into how I lead. I'm too afraid, right? It's too late for me. And I don't want the next generation or for you to do it that way. And so I think we need to understand that there have to be ways that we can show up as who we are, what's important to us, and aligned as we rise, so that we don't get to the seat and then are scrambling to figure out how we do it once we're there.
Okay, you just made me, I love that. That is, because I definitely fell into that trap when I was in consulting. I thought, when I make partner, I'll get to do things my way.
Yep.
And it was super fascinating. When I was an early manager, I got one of those post-engagement survey scores back, and it was only 2 out of 20 people want to work with you again. And I realized that I had a prototype in my head of like accountability, micromanaging, all of these things. And I'm like, that's not really who I am. I'm kind of everyone's awesome and I'm going to help you be awesome. Like, that's really my personality.
Yeah.
And with the help of an executive coach who kind of coaxed out, like, who are you really, Lisa? Like, you're not this person over here who's like task mastering. Yeah. You're really this person who creates like warm, inviting, positive environments. Once I did that, it actually didn't even matter if I made partner. It was sort of like, this is who I really am, and I'm having so much fun doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I love that, because I think what you're describing, and I know your story a little bit because we interviewed you for the book, but I think what you're describing is openness to feedback, but more importantly, is curiosity. And I just think so many of us lose our curiosity or our wonder as we're rising, because we think we have to do it a certain way. And I think you were willing to kind of get that feedback and do something about it. Like, and again, you got the choice. Like, you could have gotten that feedback and been like, that's not who I am, and they're just wrong, right? And that would have been a choice. But I think the fact that you were willing to hear it and that you were curious about it is one of your superpowers.
Oh, well, thank you, Deepa. I really love this insight of like, don't wait to get into the seat to then say, oh, now I can do things the way I want.
Yeah.
I think so many of us fall into that trap. I definitely fell into that trap of like, once I get to partner, it'll all be fine.
Because we're taught that, Lisa. We're taught, right? Just deal with it, sacrifice, like, and then one day, like, that is literally the model or the list, the playbook that most of us are given, right? One day you'll be happy. One day it'll be okay. And I think too many people are waiting for that one day and miserable, right? And also unhealthy while they're rising. And I think the real work, and part of your work, is also helping people realize that you can be yourself while you're in all these situations, because that's where the magic and the one day and the happiness comes from now. And that's just as important as the one day.
I love that. Now, a lot of your work speaks to the reality that the path to the top does not look the same for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think about people who are navigating additional barriers around identity, background, not fitting the traditional mold of a leader. What do they need to know that others don't really have to deal with?
Yeah, I think the first thing is understanding that we all work in a structure, and for a lot of us, we can feel like it doesn't work for us or a system that doesn't work for us. But that's not just the end of the work. I think it's our work to understand how the system or our company culture works, because that's information, right? That's where curiosity can lie. And once we understand how the structure, how the culture, how the company, how the people around us work, and we understand how they prioritize what they value, what they don't like, then that's information that we can operate from. So I think the first step is understanding the structure, like understanding the game, right? Before you can decide if you want to play it. And then I think the second is then understanding who you are and how you want to show up. And I think once you have that part one and that part two, that's where real success and real power comes from. But you can't just know who you are and not understand how the system works, or just understand how the system works and have no sense of who you are, because that's not a long-term career or path to sustainable leadership.
Where were you in 2010? I really needed you back then, Deepa. I think that I was so blinded by the path to the top that I never took a hard look at what the system was asking of me and what I actually wanted in life.
Yep.
And that friction caused so much pain in my life. Like I really think we're talking about how do I get promoted to that senior executive job. And I think this particular question asks us to say, like, I want to make sure that that's the job I really want, not just because I want to have the title and the status and the money that comes with it. Like, is this the system I want to buy into?
Yep. Not only that, but then I think the second question is, and how am I going to show up in it, right? And that's just as important. Because I don't think, and I think maybe if I had talked to you back then, I don't know that I knew this back then, I don't think you have to give into the system fully. But I think if you don't know how you can operate as yourself in the system, you will. And that's part of the disconnect. And by the way, I think that's why we're seeing so many senior women exit right before the C-suite, right? There's all this new data this month that women are exiting, especially at senior levels. And I think it's because of this dissonance of, can I be who I am in those models? And can it support the rest of my life? Because the structure, with the way that we, don't support caretaking and all the other roles that women, take on in the world, it's really difficult to make work. And so I think it's all of that together.
And we're not going to get to it today, but that's like the bigger philosophical question of like, can you get into that C-suite and then change the culture? Like, because systems are very hard to move. They're like aircraft carriers. They're not speedboats.
Yes. And by the way, I want to say quickly, I think you can, but you need support around you to be able to do that. You can't do it by yourself. And so you need your circle, your network, your podcast, all of the things to help you remind you that there is a different way of doing this. But it's lonely as you navigate that.
Okay, that's the next episode we'll have you on, is once I've made it into the C-suite, how do I change the system? Now, just in closing, what are 2 to 3 things someone can start doing right now to position themselves for that senior executive promotion?
I think it's getting really transparent about how you lead, how you make judgments, right? Like we talked about earlier. So showing your work, don't assuming that your work is legible from the outside. I think the second is followership, making sure that, you are creating not only relationships for sponsorship, but peer relationships, and making sure you are demonstrating that you will work well with others when you are in the seat. And I think the third is what we just talked about. It's figuring out what is the way you take care of yourself. How do you make sure that you have the tools and the resources around you so that when you get to the seat, you're going to be healthy and whole and not completely burnt out. And by the way, I think that's really important because so many people focus on getting to the seat. And honestly, I think I don't want to say it's the easy part, but it's in some ways, that's not the difficult part. The difficult part is sustaining yourself once you're there, right? Because that's where the real work is. That's where the anxiety shows up. That's where the alignment is really difficult. So if you can figure that out now, that will put you in much better, standing for when you actually are sitting in the seat.
I'm going to close out, but I think that's just a life muscle. Like, whether or not you're going to make it to that senior executive, right before we turned on the camera with you, I was on the phone with one of my old McKinsey bosses, Blair, who is my role model for who I want to be in life, other than my mother. And it's funny, I still do the text message to him of, hey, Blair, can I run something by you? Like, there's something I'm thinking about. I just need to talk it through with you. And I think back to my 28-year-old self, that would have been anxiety inducing. And the fact that now in my 40s, like, it's just a muscle I have of like, he's like 20 years older than, why not just text him? And that muscle of just saying like, hey, can I run something by you? Can I walk you through my work? Can you give me another way to think about this? Like, that's just a life muscle, I think, whether or not you're on your way to the C-suite.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love that you're still doing that you have.
Well, you're that for me too. I was like, can I run something by you? I'm going to call you. I am, you know this, I am the queen of the, I'll just call you. I won't even text you. And you'll be like, did I know that we had time scheduled?
But I think that's like a really smart way. I mean, you're basically doing the C-suite role, right? You're getting buy-in, whether or not those people are sitting in the seat next to you. That's kind of what we're talking about this whole time. It's not only taking people on your journey, but showing them that you build trust, that you know what you're doing, that you are figuring things out. People just feel really invested, and I think that's such an important part of this, because people think leadership is like the lone hero, this idea that, you know, it's just you, but it's not. Real leadership is having the team around you, is having people within the company, but also outside that you can lean on, because no one knows what they're doing right now. Like, it's chaos out there, right? And we're all figuring it out. And so those of us that have strong support systems, that have mentors, that have places we can call, phone a friend, that's who I think is really doing well in this moment, or at least surviving in this moment.
I love that. Well, Deepa, thank you for coming on In Confidence.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It's always so fun to talk to you.
I hope you loved that conversation with Deepa. I certainly learned a lot from it. And for each episode this season, I'm giving you one power move to practice right away. And here's your power move this week. Stop waiting for someone to notice your work. Make your thinking visible. I love that Deepa said, let people into your thought process, how you're getting the work done. And after your next big project or your next big meeting or your next win, I want you to send a short note to your team or your manager that walks through what you did, how you approached it, and what you learned. This isn't bragging. You're showing your judgment. And at every level, that's what people are actually evaluating. Before we close, I've built something into this season that matters to me, because growth deserves to be seen, ownership deserves to be named, and the people doing the work deserve to be celebrated. So at the end of each episode, we're going to recognize someone who's leading with gravitas. And I want to shout out today to my dear friend Deepa. She just shared with us all of these insights around what it takes to get promoted to senior levels. And she spent over 21 years studying how power works, wrote the book on being the first, and built an entire think tank so the rest of us don't have to figure it out alone. So go get her book, The First, the Few, and Only. Shout out, I'm actually in one of the chapters, and visit her website to learn more. Links are in the show notes. I hope you love this episode of In Confidence. I hope you're leaving the space stronger, more informed than the way you entered it. Please like, comment, subscribe, all the things so that we amplify our work and more people get to feel the impact of the things that we're sharing with the world. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it today. And until next time, in the words of my 9-year-old self, I see you, I value you, and I believe in you. This is In Confidence.